Wrestling fans, buckle up because today on the Kumite Lifestyle Podcast, we are joined by Delaware wrestling legend, Coach Kurt Howell. If you know anything about the sport in the state, then you already know his name echoes through every gym, every mat, and every generation that's come after him. Coach Howell is a four-time Delaware state champion, finishing his high school career with 108 wins and 0 losses, a record that has never been touched since. He didn't stop there. He became a top national recruit, chose Clemson University, and battled some of the best names the sport has ever seen on the Division I stage. Wrestlers who later became NCAA champions, Olympians, and icons in their own right. We dive into what it takes to mentally prepare for greatness, why discipline always beats motivation, and how your body takes over when training becomes instinct, and why the gap between high school wrestling and Division I college wrestling is the steepest jump in sports. We also explore how Coach Howell's wrestling journey evolved into 30 years of teaching, coaching, mentoring, and shaping lives, and why he says he'd do this work for free if he could. So if you're a wrestler, a coach, athlete, parent, or anyone who believes in the power of grit, preparation, and legacy, this episode is a masterclass. Let's get after it. Welcome to the Kumite Lifestyle Podcast with Coach Kurt Howell. What's up, Kumite Lifestyle Podcast, and welcome back, everyone. Today we are joined by a very special guest, the one and only Coach Kurt Howell from Delaware. Coach, how's it going today?
It's great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And funny story. So for those watching, I've known you for a while, through wrestling, way back in my high school days. And I remember when I was coaching at St. Thomas More, I would come to some of your open mats, or Caesar Rodney had open mats, which is a high school here in Delaware. And I remember you giving me some awesome tips. And I just always valued that you always gave people time, and you never, like if someone had a question or just a conversation, you always took time to say hello. So it's something that I've always admired about you, aside from your wrestling. And then we just saw each other yesterday, kind of in passing. And I said, man, I would love to have Coach Kurt Howell on the podcast. And it's like less than 24 hours. Here we are. So yeah, thank you for your time.
Yeah, like I said, Nick, it just kind of worked out when I saw you the other day. I've been, once wrestling season starts, I'm beaten down with time, and I'm not really don't have too much free time. And it just kind of worked out that I had an in-service day the next day. And I was like, yeah, sure. It was perfect timing on your part to hit me up then.
Yep, absolutely. So there's some things I hope that you can share with the viewers today about your wrestling experience. But I think what some people might not know is that you're actually a school teacher as well. So let's kind of start off with that. How long have you been a school teacher, and what subject matter do you teach?
It's interesting you ask, because I've been teaching for 30 years. This is my 30th year. I started teaching at Indian River High School, actually at Selbyville Middle School, and then Indian River High School for 8 years. And that's before I came to Smyrna School District. And it's been great here at Smyrna. I teach psychology, advanced placement psychology, and then one class of history of conflict. But if you ask me what I have taught, I've taught every subject in the social studies curriculum. I've done economics and all the history classes, civics, political science, just, world history, you name it, I've taught it.
Yeah,
But
no, that's awesome. So I got to ask, what came first, teaching in school or coaching, or like did it kind of all just happen at once?
it's, kind of a long story. I'll try not to make it too long and boring, but just for me, it's just always been like whatever was next, whatever was right in my face and was next thing to do in my life. I just said, okay, that's where it was. I think when I was in, when I was growing up, my parents were both teachers, and so it was, it kind of seemed like a natural fit, but I just never saw myself being a teacher. I just was just never on my radar.
Sure.
If you'd asked me when I was in college, I was majoring in history and minoring in psychology, what I was going to do when I graduated with a degree in history and psychology, I would have told you, well, I'm going to be an Olympic champion. Everything else is going to take care of itself. I just never really thought about that. But then, I started teaching. I started teaching at camps, and then, one by one camps that I was teaching at, like the coaches would come up to me and say, "Hey, do you have a teaching degree? Because we got an opening," and blah blah blah. And I was like, and that's what just got me thinking about teaching. I was like, you know what? Maybe I can do this stuff, because it seemed like I had, the knack for it with wrestling. I could
Sure.
connect with kids, identify things, but I just never saw myself doing that with an academic subject. But then once I got into it, it just like I just love standing up in front of the classroom, sometimes boring a bunch of kids to death and putting them to sleep. But it just the thing about standing in front of a class is I love to talk, and when I'm standing in front of a class, it's they have to listen. They can't walk away. So
Yeah.
it's like, hey, I got a captive audience. It's fun to talk about history. I love psychology, and that stuff kind of translates into coaching wrestling too, because I use a lot of wrestling is all psychology, and
Yeah.
sports in general is psychology. And and I always use like history analogies when I'm trying to relate my kids to things, mental approaches to sports. So it just it's fun. I enjoy it. I really enjoy it, and I will miss teaching next year, and I probably would keep doing it if it wasn't for having to put grades in the book. I still enjoy teaching front of the kids and dealing with kids every day, but it's just that thing, like what I was just doing before I got on with you, was putting grades in the book. I'm like, I hate this, and that's part of the reason I was looking forward to your podcast here, because I was like, it's gonna give me. So,
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
yeah, that's the story.
No, that's awesome. And you said something how like you've been teaching now for, quite a while, and just kind of the evolution of the school system itself. And it kind of just reminded me of wrestling, where like nowadays, and like before we get into your wrestling career, how kids have so much access to wrestling as far as technology goes. They can just go on their phone and watch videos, where I know like even myself being 35, when I was in high school, we didn't have Instagram or all these mainstreams where we could just, access these videos. And, and I'm not a teacher or a school teacher like you are, but I've worked in school districts. So I can kind of see that progression and how efficiency things kind of become over time. So it just also reminds me of the sport of wrestling. So I want to kind of start there. So you are one of the most accomplished wrestlers in Delaware, from what I read and from what I've heard. So I'll let you kind of share your story. So we have the academic side of Mr. Howe. I'm sure the kids call you, or Coach Howe. So let's start with your
They
wrestling
call
from
me other things, but
so
they call me other things.
gotcha.
Go
So
ahead.
when did you like? How did you get introduced to wrestling? Because like, was that something that you like, started off as a young age? Because you hear a lot about like these college kids, and some of these international guys where they started at like age 5 or 6. Was that the same thing for you, Coach?
Uh, Sort of. I was introduced to it through my brother, who was at a YMCA clinic, and I was too young to be in it. And
Yeah.
I guess the younger kids, I was in this gymnastics thing, and I kept stealing away and telling the gymnastics teacher I was going to the bathroom, and I'd go watch my brother wrestling. And the guy just invited me in, and he had a little kid for me to look, and that's how it started. But I didn't really. I, my dad made a decision, like when I was, yeah, I think I was in fifth grade. My older brother was in eighth, and he just was like, "Hey, let's I'm not sure if I actually made a decision, but he asked me, I think, if I wanted to do it. And I was like, hell yeah. He started going to freestyle and Greco terms. And really, that's where I started taking off with it. Me and my brother Dickie would travel to like, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and and then it turned into like everywhere in the country. We were finding guys to wrestle. We were practicing in New Jersey and stuff because there wasn't anything going on in Delaware at the time.
Yeah.
And then I think when I was like in seventh grade, I got real competitive, and I started writing down like all the results of my matches, and I think I tabbed about 170 matches that year. Um,
Wow.
and just wrestling, it was just like my dad had me going, and my mom and dad would just like travel back and forth, taking when Dickie was in high school, he would, I'd be at different events, and so they were taking us to different things. So they, very active. And then of course, my younger brother Brad got involved also. So Brad and I kind of traveled around together during the my brother Dickie's high school season. So
Yeah.
it's my parents were really like, they gave up everything they had in their life,
Mm.
set up things for us, and it was, you know I just never really thought about like all the sacrifices that they went through until I became a coach and then a parent. I think about all that stuff. My mom just recently passed away. My dad passed away, you know, like 20 years ago. And when that happens, it gives you cause to reflect on all the things that you appreciate about what they did, sacrifice for.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I got involved. It's that's at least the beginning of the story.
Yeah. And you mentioned something just now how you and your brothers would travel outside of Delaware. So I'm curious, at that time for you, who did you look to as maybe inspiration or like what wrestlers during your like early era time period, if you will, did you kind of seek out, or was there anyone like in particular that you wanted to be like, you know what, like I want to train with this coach or like I want to train with this guy that kind of helped elevated your game?
Yeah, there's a number of people I could say. Certainly my brother, because I just remember watching him and just like kind of like so identifying with like him, and like when he was in high school, and just thinking like I remember when he made it to the state semifinals his freshman year, and I was like, wow, that's great. He's going to win the state. His picture was in the page. It's like a big thing. And I was like, wow, I'm going to do that. And then I couldn't believe it when he got beat in the semifinals. And I was like so angry,
Mm,
like angry and upset for him that I just like, I remember kind of going through this, God, when I'm a freshman, I'm going to win that. And so it just like those things, yeah, like I could see where I wanted to go through what he was doing.
yeah.
Uh, and I think when I was really that seventh grade year when I really got competitive, I began following college wrestling, and Steve Bastianelli was I think a senior at Lehigh that year. And so I went up to a couple of matches, and my dad took me to talk to him after the match, and I remember like corresponding with Steve. Like I sent letters to him and telling him how I was training, and I was trying to get like input from him and advice from him. Being a Delaware guy that was doing that at the national level. So,
Yeah.
uh, and then it just kind of like at an early age, those I would say my dad, my brother, and Steve, and I looked up to a lot of coaches too. My dad got me exposure to a lot of different coaches, and then um, I think it's like, I mean, sometimes he just put me out there and just say, go out here
Yeah.
and get me a, one. My dad was really, he was off the grid a little bit with how he approached giving us exposure because he put a lot of trust in um, my not maturity. I was 12 and he sent me and my younger brother Brad. He got us bus tickets to go out to Nebraska to a camp.
Wow. Wow.
Like we went across half. I mean, I don't think you'd ever do that today. It's not something that like I would do with my kids, or I would advise. But we went to like Brad and I traveled out to Nebraska for like a 2 week camp. He met us out there with like the rest of the Delaware group, like my brother and the Thomas brothers, Belden and his older brothers,
Yeah.
all met us out there. And then especially in the national tournament, I qualified for a world team camp. And like after that tournament, I got on another bus with that group of kids and went to Colorado Springs to train and practice for like 2 weeks.
That's
And
crazy.
then I remember that summer, like that summer, I remember I got back to Delaware in like the first week of August, and I had been gone since the middle of June. And
Yeah.
I was like, I hadn't been home. I was like, dang, I've been away for a long time.
Yeah.
Uh, like that's something that's kind of like, I think it's an uncharacteristic thing, like to, for some, a parent to think like this. But I also remember it wasn't like you said, here you go, just here's a ticket, just go out there. I remember him talking to me through making me responsible for my brother, saying, "Hey, I want you to every bus station you pick up the phone. Here's my number. You call this and check in every time you get there, and whenever you leave." And so there were things, and we had to. He gave me a list of things that I had to do, and it made me kind of like think about making lists and preparing myself mentally for things. And I kind of do that as a coach too. I go through a checklist. Anybody who's coaching has to go through your mental checklist. So, yeah, I would say, you know, my dad, my brother, Steve, Steve from afar, but a lot of coaches that I got exposure to those long summers I spent away from home.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And man, that's awesome. I had no idea, even for someone that, loves wrestling and, has researched it. That's awesome that you had that experience to go to Nebraska and then go to the Olympic Training Center. I think that's a, pretty cool experience. And coach, can you recall like during that time, because you said that you got on a second bus to go to Colorado Springs, were there any wrestlers that are I guess big names now that you can recall at that camp, or like were there like rising stars in their own era that were there?
Yeah, they were all there. I mean,
Yeah,
everybody that was like everybody that you like look back at right now in like the 80s
yeah,
and 90s as like I mean, Lee Kemp was there. I remember like I followed Lee Kemp to a bunch of camps. I watched him wrestle out there. So he was older than me, but there were like world team uh, matches. I remember like watching. They brought us in. It was crazy. Like this, like today you have a world team wrestle off, and it's like couple thousand people come to Penn State, it's packed the gym. But back then it was like there was a world team match with Chris Campbell and Dave Schultz.
yeah, yeah. Wow.
Like these two guys, we like they rolled out mats in like a spare room, and that's where they had these wrestle offs. And I remember like we were sitting around the mat, like, kind
Like
of
kids.
cross, like they invited us to go watch it, but we're like sitting around there and there's like nobody there except us and a couple of coaches and stuff. I'm like, you know, I didn't think anything of it then at the time, but now, like, you look back and like I saw that like two of the greatest wrestlers of that era go at it, and there wasn't like a big fanfare about it. They just wrestled.
Yeah.
I remember like, you know one of the two of them got a really powerful front headlock. It might have been Campbell, and I think I remember he like Stokes had to one of them had like tapped out during the middle of the front headlock. It was a really awesome event. But
Wow.
yeah, those, I mean, like Greco guys like Andy Saris, Don Selden, these were guys that eventually I would be teammates with when I moved up to New York and tried to, was training to try to make the Olympic team up there.
Sure.
Um, Isaac Ramaswamy, those are big Greco names that were there at those camps. Uh, Jim Jordan, who's a U.S.
Yeah.
senator.
Yeah.
I watched. He wrestled my brother there. Actually, my brother lost to him in a wrestle off at Colorado Springs. John Smith was out there.
Of course.
I'm trying to think who else that would be like big names back then. Randy Couture.
Mm.
I'm looking over here. I got his poster sitting up in my room, but I roomed with him at like a training camp, and like kids like, you roomed with that guy. I have his poster sitting up in the room. I saw him out in Las Vegas, about 10 years ago, and I was like, hey, can you sign this for me? And he was doing some kind of promo for MMA, and he's like, yeah, sure. So yeah, I you know it, I could go probably through, like I said, you could probably go through the list of all the guys that you're looking that you would say in the 80s and 90s were world teamers,
Yeah.
and they were out there. They were out there, yeah. And
Man,
I,
that's
pretty much would do stuff like that every year. So that, I got, all that, the group of guys out there like that. I developed either rivalries with them or friendships with them, or guys that I like. I see, sometimes some of them I still keep in touch with today.
yeah.
Like, Dan Russell is one. I think he's often like, different countries doing Peace Corps training, wrestling training things. It's really interesting things that he's doing. But I see
Yeah.
him at like, the nationals. When I go to NCAA's, I see all these guys again, and we're like, hey, you had a lot more hair the last time I saw you.
No, that's awesome. And Coach, I couldn't agree any more with you. I think when like as I'm hearing you talk, it's like, you really had to be, as they say, in the moment then, because, there wasn't no social media. And you mentioned like, letters and like, having to call your, dad and your brother when you were traveling. And I think those experiences, like I mean, as much as I loved my time in wrestling and like today's era, if you will, man, I would just sometimes I think, man, like I would have loved to have been back in the 80s and 90s, just just training just hard, because that's all you guys had. There were no, I feel like there weren't as many distractions for wrestlers back then than there are now, and again, it has its ups and downs. I mean, like now wrestlers, like I said, things are more easily accessible, today's age, but the fact that you had the chance to really connect with those, those top guys then, and it's crazy because I'm sure as that was happening in the moment for you, like you didn't realize, like, man, like, one day, kids are going to be looking at me as like, the guy that was, great back then. So it's, I think it's awesome how it comes for like, full circle, if you will. So before we jump into your collegiate career, I do got to ask, when you were wrestling in high school, what was kind of your preparation, before like any match or any big match? So, because as a high school coach itself, like what are some of the differences that you've seen from when you were preparing for a high school match and now like you watch your high school kids preparing, if there is a difference?
Um, I don't know if there's like today, like from today to then. Um, I don't think there's a difference because wrestling is still the same thing.
Sure.
You could say the world's changed and we have like, social media, but that doesn't change the sport. I mean, wrestling, you just strip down everything from who you are,
Yeah.
like off the mat, and you step out of that with nothing. So, that I don't think there's really a change. How did I get get myself ready? Um, I think, like I said, I try to. I There's a saying that I use a lot. Discipline beats motivation.
Yeah.
Um, I, some people have used the term preparation beats motivation, but I like discipline better, and I use that, and I talk to my kids about that. Um, I used to think about like my opponents, and I in a way I kind of be amused, not like laughing at them, but I kind of be amused at how they, when I see people getting ready for matches, firing themselves up and getting that. And you do have to be like energized to go out and wrestle. But in my mind, if you haven't done the preparation before that, you get, when you step out on the mat, it's just, you can't like log in when you go out there. You
Yeah.
have to log in every day. You have to like in it. What you do every day is what you're going to see on the mat. And it's a message I try to use when I'm coaching. Like
Sure.
if if you don't prepare here in the wrestling room, in the place where you sweat, all this stuff, if you're not preparing here the way you want to compete, you can't just turn it on a match day. You can't turn it on because when you get out there, your 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 unconscious mind takes over. Your brain takes over, and your brain it shuts down, and your body takes over
Yeah.
literally. And
Yeah.
body just responds to things and if you haven't trained your body to respond to things in the right way, it doesn't know how to respond, and you get like super nervous and get like and so I always used to be like, as I'm going into a match, I used to just do the things that I have, like I prepared to my body's going to take and trust my body to take over. And in those situations, when things, if I've out trained and my goal when I get out there is to do my best. And as long as I've done my best, the things that I did before that, I can adjust those for the next match. So
Yeah.
I used to just like say, I got to trust what I've done. If I've trained the right way, if I've eaten the right food, if I've, practiced correctly, I've, drilled, as much as I could, practice as much as I could, train my body the way it should be trained, and I've done everything correctly. I really don't have to worry about what's going to happen on that because, the right things are going to take over.
I love it.
So I try to pass a message on to my athletes, to just, um, you know, don't worry about, they get like, kids get really, they psych themselves out. They get psych themselves. This is really important. All these people are watching. Well, yeah, the only thing that's different is you're out there by yourself. But really, you know, it's nothing different. It's not different.
Yeah.
If it's different for you, then you're not preparing correctly.
Yeah. Coach, I love the analogy that you said about you can't just turn the lights on game day because your body does take over. And man, that is so true. So I do jujitsu and karate as well. And it just reminded me of like, yeah, like every time I slap hands or fist bump with someone, it's like your body does take over. And I think that's a really good like the way you worded it is awesome. I think anyone that's watching this that is a grappler or wrestling, like you said, you have to, you know, only you know, like if you put the work in. And I remember my coaches always saying, like, the practice is where you get better, but because the game day shouldn't be the hardest part. That's almost like the culmination of your hard work. So, yeah, thank you for clarifying that. So, I know in high school, coach, you were a four-time state champion, and I gotta ask, so I feel like, I mean, I was never a state champion, so I'm sure winning, multiple state champions has to be a good feeling. But for you back then, was winning a four-time state champion kind of uncommon when you were in high school? Like, because were many people doing that just in general, or like were you kind of one of the first people, at least in your, era to do that?
Well, there was a four-time state champion in Delaware before me.
Okay.
Uh, so I was the second four-time state champion. The
Awesome.
four-time state champion before me. Oh gosh, I'm blanking on his name. My dad used to know him because he was. I think he was a football. He was a heavyweight. He was a football player too.
Sure.
Um, it bothers me that I can't think of his name because I want to give him the props that he used to do. Um, but so yeah, it wasn't something that was common, and it's I mean maybe it was less common back then because kids are coming today. They're coming up with like a wealth of a lot of technique. All this technique is out there, so kids can get access to learning stuff early.
Yeah.
So it was less common then that because kids didn't do. I mean, it was very uncommon what my dad those things that I told you about that my dad did with me. That was very uncommon. Like a kid leaving home for the entire summer and spending their whole summer, 6 hours a day on wrestling mats. It just was, it wasn't common. That's why, what, winning the fourth state titles back then was very uncommon. And it, certainly going undefeated,
Yeah.
not and it's not something that's been done in Delaware even since then. And people have asked me about that, and I say to them, I've coached four-time state champions who were not undefeated.
Yeah.
If they were undefeated, I would say that I didn't do my job as a coach to challenge them the right way. Like
Yeah.
like Brent Fleetwood,
Yeah.
um, you know, he was a four-time state champion. And, Gabe Gianpietro was,
Yep.
which I helped with his, some of his development. He was a four-time state champion. Um, you know, what, and Brent understood that mindset. I was like, if I'm doing my job, I'm getting you guys that can challenge and beat, so that they can, so that you can, if you like his junior year, he was undefeated. He was 60. Well, I don't know. I think he won 60 some matches that year, 63-0, I think, and I did. I said to him like that was uncommon, but we didn't make it to the Ironman tournament that year, and I was like that's what I. And then the next year we went to the Ironman, and he lost a match there. I think he might have lost in the Beast
Yeah.
finals also.
Yeah.
Uh, but so I don't think people ask me, is anybody ever going to be undefeated? And I say, well, like if I'm coaching them, they shouldn't be. And they say, well, what about your coach? And I said, well, they were like, did he do his job as a coach? And I say, well, back then it was a different time.
Yeah.
I wish he was able to get me exposure against, and he did try. He brought teams into the Newark Invitational to challenge the kids in my weight that could challenge me. But you know, fortunately, I was able to, but we didn't have like the Beast of the East. We didn't have the Iron Man. We didn't have that kind of exposure and ability. So my dad kind of took care of that for me, where he just said, "Look, we're going out to the biggest tournaments. The junior nationals. We're going to go. Put me in the Northeast regionals every year, and I ended up winning that 6 times. And I was like, well, and my dad was like, well, the next step is the national tournament, man. If you win that stuff, then we're going to take you to the world competition. You win all that crap, and you deserve to be undefeated. But nobody goes undefeated
Sure.
in the world we live in now, and that's the 108 no record that I had in high school. I tell kids all the time, it's like that was my high school season. It wasn't my whole year.
Yeah.
Each year.
So now, Coach, let's talk about your collegiate career. So let's talk about that jump from high school to college. I know you went to, what's
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
so you went to Clemson. So before we talk about your experiences at Clemson and what you achieved at college, if you can talk about the recruiting process, like how was the recruiting back then, and what other schools were what other options did you have, Coach?
Um, I was, I think I had things narrowed down to, I took my recruiting visits to Lock Haven, Lehigh, um, Syracuse,
Okay.
and Clemson. The ironic thing about that is 2 of those 4 programs don't have wrestling anymore.
Yeah, Syracuse, right? Syracuse.
Syracuse and Clemson do not have wrestling.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was a top recruit. I think I was the #1 recruit in my weight class that year. And I think I was on that, what do you call it, the dream team thing.
Oh, the Dapper
Um,
Dan.
well, I was supposed to wrestle in that. I was like the dream. I don't know if they have it still now. They call it the dream team.
Oh, yeah, it's two
Um,
different events. Yes, yes, yes. You're right. Yep.
so it's not an event. The dream team is just a listing. It's like a ranking. At least
Oh,
it was. I
gotcha.
don't know if it is right now, but back then they did have Dapper Dan. It was called the Pittsburgh Press Classic, and I was invited to that for Nashville versus Pennsylvania. Um, I didn't wrestle in it because I hurt my knee, and I had to get surgery on my knee before it. So yeah, I was recruited by those schools, took my visits to those schools. I liked Clemson. My brother was at Lock Haven, and that
Yep.
was a hard decision. I wanted, I wanted to be around him, and I identified with a lot of guys from Lock Haven too. But ultimately I kind of like the South, and I am, I love Clemson. It was great. I mean, they did a first class recruiting, on me. The coach was great, and I love the school. I like the South. The South is so
Yeah.
nice. The weather was better, and I was like, okay, this is a great place. It's going to be a great place, and I liked it there. I have no regrets.
No, it's awesome that you found a place where, the coaches wanted you to be there, and like you said, the first class recruiting. So when you got to Clemson, man, what was that jump from the college to high school? Because I hear it all the time when I listen to, other wrestlers talk about that jump. But what was that jump for you? And early on, maybe the first couple weeks in college, did you say to yourself, man, this is tough? College wrestling is no joke, or maybe it was or maybe that experience was a little bit different for you. So, talk us through, kind of your early years in college, if you.
Uh, it was what I expected. I think. I don't think I was getting. I didn't feel like that. I knew there was a jump. I understood what it was. And that's where I go back to. I watched my brother go through that. I knew there was a there was a big difference. And I tell kids all the time that there is, I heard a person who coaches other sport.
You're just talking about how you like when you went to Clemson, like you kind of expected there to be a jump and because you had seen that in your brother. And then and then after that, like I kind of wanted to ask, like, what were some of like your most, I guess, memorable college matches? Because I know at one point, I'm not sure if it was your junior or senior year, you earned All-American status at the national tournament. And before you tell us, man, I was looking at the bracket that year, and there are a lot of names that are still, big and relevant today, whether they're not so much competing, but like a lot of big name coaches. So, man,
Yeah.
like, so that had to be awesome. Yeah. So, yeah, just talk to us a little bit more about your college, experiences, and then, when you finally got over that hump and earned that All-American status.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, certainly it was tough. I mean, just I think I let like when my phone died, I was telling you that there's a guy that I coached with a long time ago who said
Yes. Yes. Yes.
that there's no greater jump from one level of any sport to the next level of that sport than there is from high school wrestling to Division I college wrestling. And but I think like I was saying, I was exposed to a lot before that, and I was ready for it. I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And I I was looking forward to that kind of challenge, and like I think I started off my college career. I wrestled in two tournaments. The West Virginia Open, I think, and then Ohio Open, and I had 15 matches in over the two tournaments. I had uh, six or seven matches at maybe it was 16. I don't know. I was like it was 16-1 after, or 15-1 after those two tournaments. I won the West Virginia and got third in the Ohio Open, and ended up beating the guy that I lost to in that tournament for third place. So I had started off like right away. I jumped right into the rankings. I was like, I think I was ranked ninth.
Wow.
It was interesting because my brother was a senior that year wrestling at Lock Haven, and he was at the same weight as me. And if you looked in the rankings, he was ranked eighth and I was ranked ninth.
Wow.
So then, like, I kind of ran into the injury bug, kind of like hit me up. I had two knee operations in December. Um, one on the one knee after that tournament, and then I tried to come back and like at the Sunshine Open, and I hurt the other knee, and I had to get that scoped. And like, I, you have to fight your way through those injuries, and you have to learn how to overcome those things. And I just don't think I did. I came back correctly. I
Yeah.
think I think it's kind of like the era back then. It was just like suck it up, and rub some dirt on it, get back in there. And I think I just had the mentality like like I'm just gonna fight my way through it. And I think it kind of those injuries kind of like snowballed on me, and I didn't I didn't ultimately prepare myself correctly to handle the injuries well. And that
Sure.
was that was maybe the biggest difference. Like I didn't have to deal with that kind of adversity in high school, and so I don't think I was adequately, or I was mentally prepared to handle the injury bug.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, competing against like a lot of the greats was um, I wrestled Tom Brands. I wrestled Jason Kelber, who
Yeah. He
beat
beat
Terry
Brands.
Brands in the
Yep.
finals. I think actually I had like the closest match with Kelber that year.
You did. I saw that in the brackets. I saw that. Yep.
And then like when I in the wrestlebacks, the, like I had
You had
gone out in a
Sean
blood drought.
Charles too.
Yeah, John Charles, he was the toughest guy I think I wrestled. He was I swear that guy came at me and I was like I thought it was a truck. I thought it was wrestling truck that was running me over.
Wow.
But but yeah, he was tough and a lot of good wrestlers in there. And I continued because my knees were so bad. I continued wrestling after that in Greco though.
Yeah.
So and then matches I had there. I mean, I wrestled. Did some freestyle in Greco. I ended up I wrestled. I beat. I ended up like beating. I lost one in Greco, and then I won one in freestyle against Sammy Henson.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that would have been you know yeah, Sammy was he was a friend of mine, and came to my camp and everything. He's you know, and so like I had some signature matches, and I think Sammy would like to take the match back that he lost to me, but I always I said to him, I was like, yeah, I'd like to take that Greco match that you beat me back because that was supposed to be my thing, and I wrestled. A few world champions that in Greco afterwards, and I had wrestled. I had a couple of tight matches with Dennis Hall, who was a world
Yeah.
champion.
Yep. Yep.
Uh, I beat him early in his career when he was just coming up, and then he got my had my number and ended up beating me in the finals of the Olympic trials. So those were like I think I kind of had my better matches in freestyle and Greco than in college. College was a lot harder physically on me.
Yeah.
Try to keep my body healed and in the right frame throughout that. So it not I always kind of look at injuries as I always used to train myself to look at that as like that's an excuse. Don't use that as that. So like when I feel uncomfortable now saying those things because it feels like I'm saying, well, I could have, would have, should have.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I feel like what I could have, should have, would have were how you handle injuries, and it gives me a little bit of perspective now about when I'm coaching about how to handle kids when they get injured.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, um,
Coach,
uh,
was there like were you close like were you friends with like some of those guys that you mentioned coming up like um like maybe the Brands brothers or like Sean Charles or like what was the wrestling community like back then? Because I feel like it's kind of I mean wrestling in itself is a pretty close-knit circle to begin with, but I just wonder like for you like back in those college days was it just all straight rivalry or like did you ever get a chance to like connect with those guys or because I've heard how tough the Brands were and just I don't know, did you ever get a chance to just meet and like talk with those guys like after the matches?
no, I don't. You know, I mean, yes and no. I knew who they were. I don't know if those guys actually, looked at me and thought of me as like a rival or anything. I
Yeah.
just was a number on the chart for them, and they had to, somebody they had to get past. Um, yeah, in my mind, I was like, yeah, I'm, coming out here to get these guys, and
Yeah.
I remember, and I mean, some of them were guys that you talked to, and you saw, and you were like, yeah, hey, good, good luck, and you hang out with them, a little bit before you guys, you're back there warming up, and so yeah, I mean, yeah, like I remember, who was it? The Penn State wrestler Bobby Truby. He and I wrestled in little wrestlers. We were we kind of went at each other a little bit, but and when we were in college, we kind of like supported each other. I think it's more of like a conference thing.
Yeah.
Guys that were in the ACC, when we went to nationals, we'd hang out together and like be like, of course we're head to head going in dual meets and in the conference. But when we're at nationals, we'd like all hang out, be like, man, I hope hope you're in the, make it to the finals. Good luck there. Hope so we kind of supported each other in that way. The guys that were in like the Big Tens, like and I knew Kelber. Kelber was he was a good guy. Brands just wasn't somebody you talked to. I don't know. I just didn't
Yeah.
feel he was. And Sean Charles. I mean, he was at Arizona State, so I rarely saw him except when I stepped on the mat to wrestle him. But I knew him afterwards a little bit because
Yeah.
he coached with one of my coaches.
Okay.
He coached with Tom Borelli, and I know Borelli used to talk to me about him all the time and say what a good coach he was. And he used to be like, he used to commiserate. I'd be like, man, my last wrestling match, I got pinned by him, and I was like, and he was like, and I was like, I wish I didn't, but and he was like, he'd smile and he'd be like, that's the toughest SOB I ever knew. He'd be like, it's okay. You got beat by him. I'm like, yeah, but it's not okay in my mind. If you're a competitor, you don't like to lose.
Yeah.
So,
And then speaking of the ACC, I ran into Rob Cole at Final X. I showed you that picture, and
yeah.
and when I told him that I was from Delaware, he said, "Oh yeah, you're like Kurt and Dickie Howe." So I thought that was I actually like I thought that moment was pretty was probably more cooler than the matches I saw, just because it was a Delaware connection, and he spoke very highly of you. So shout out to Rob Cole out there.
Yeah, Rob is he's a great I mean, obviously his family lineage, they're awesome. Um uh but yeah, he was I think he wrestled in, was it New Jersey? I think he was a local, came out somewhere around our mid-Atlantic. So I knew him when he was in high school and stuff, and watched him. And of course his dad was a great wrestler. But then when he was at um, North Carolina, you know,
Yeah,
that's kind of, you see him all the time when you're down there. It's kind of like I say with Brands, those guys were
the Big Ten.
Big Ten, Kelber. I didn't see those guys much, but you saw guys like Rob all the time, and we knew each other. And then you'd sit, after weigh-ins, you'd go out to eat. You'd see the guys from the ACC, and you'd all go over there and say, hey, how you doing? Shake hands, sit down with them, and say good luck. And if you ended up at a party after the tournament, you'd go to the ACC guys' parties, So that
Yeah,
was, yeah.
that's awesome. So, Coach, before we wrap it up, I wanted to give you like a chance to kind of like reflect on your coaching career. And I know you could probably go days, on that, but just to kind of give you this opportunity, what's like for you, like what have been some of your most memorable and profound moments as a coach, and how did it help, continue on to like your love for wrestling today?
Goodness. I don't, it's a really tough question, wide
Sure.
open there. A lot of things, you know, I, I look back at the way I coached when I started. I coached actually before high school. I coached as an assistant coach at St. Cloud State in Minnesota.
Oh, wow.
And so I have actually coached at every level, from, the youngest kids all the way up. And I have, at my camps, we get kids from, age 6 and 7 all the way up to, high school. And so I coach kids at every level. And still, I think that the thing that kind of stands out to me is like guys that you have a connection with,
Yeah.
just like the long-standing connection that wrestling gives. It's like we had like a Smyrna Little Wrestler tournament yesterday,
Yep.
and like all of the former wrestlers that I coached that now have children that they're bringing over to that tournament that you were at the other day, and I'm walking through that gym, and like I you know I on it, it's not, I couldn't get where I wanted to get because I kept stopping and seeing like a former wrestler of mine or somebody that was and talking to them about their children and their son or their daughter even, and how they're doing in the sport, and and of course all my wrestlers that are wrestlers here at Smyrna are working at the tournament, so I'm trying to check in with them, and you know my wife called me and told me that I had to come home, and I realized I had to cross the gym to get my car, and I was like, I got to get home quickly because she's in a, and I was like, uh-oh, maybe I'll walk under the bleachers so I can get to there, because when when you talk to somebody, you just want to give them their attention, and that's
Yep.
so yeah, coaching has been, um it's given me the opportunity to put, like people affected me,
Yeah.
and like my dad, my brother. I had so many great coaches that are part of who I am today, and um, it's given me the opportunity to pass that on,
Yeah.
to pass the lessons that people who were kind enough to take me under and teach me and talk to me and coach me, and even people that I just I watch wrestle, that and I watch coach, and that all of the influences that I've had, coaching has given me that opportunity. It's like I would do this for free. I get paid a little bit, but it's something that you know, I, like I used to give clinics, and people would pay me for those clinics, and I always felt like a little dirty afterwards. It'd be like, well, I love to do this. And
Yeah.
then I stopped. I just said, I remember one was a friend of mine, and I was working with his son, and I was like, you're just you don't have to pay me anymore. I really like teaching him. He's a great kid, and I want to make him get better. And it makes me feel good when I see. And it doesn't make I don't like connecting the things that I love to do with money. And I
Yeah.
don't have to. That's the way of the world. We have to pay your bills and things like that. But I just I like to, you know, uh, as an assistant coach right now, it just is so much fun for me to get in there and just like, you know, just I feel so happy when I walk into a wrestling room, and
Yeah.
I see it filled up with kids, and I walk around and just like, shake hands, high five kids, and talk to them, and then when they're paying attention to me, and I just it gets my mind going, it gets me out, it gets problems with wrestling that they present to me gets me thinking, and it keeps me going over, like I think about things, and I tell the kids I dream wrestling moves. So like the problems that you give me, that that you can come up with, with your problem. This is I can't figure out this technique, and like tell it to me. If I can't figure it out by tomorrow, I will, because I'll sleep on it, and it'll come to me at night. The wrestling gods come to me at night and plant solutions in my brain, so I love thinking about that stuff, and whether it's like the mental side of the sport, or and that those challenges that presents, or the technical side. Uh,
Yeah.
I just love all of it because it's all part of who we are as people.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, Coach, and you know, like you are Delaware wrestling. So when I
Mm,
think of wrestling, I think of you. And you said something just now how like you're constantly thinking of wrestling, dreaming of wrestling, and and also like there's a reason why athletes, parents, and coaches, or just anyone that knows you, when you're walking through a gymnasium, there's a reason why people want to stop and talk to you. It's that legacy that you've built. It's like you've set this high pedestal, if you will, but it's is obtainable, and that's why people, they seek you out. And I think it's a huge compliment to you. Like you
mm.
might not see it that way initially, but you've changed a lot of lives. And it's crazy how I was never one of your wrestlers, but I just even the short times that we've had when I was coaching, and you would give me some of your time and just say, "Oh yeah, like when you're coaching, do it this way." And I remember one time you said, "Yeah, if you ever have any questions, just reach out." And I I never had to, but I just felt like, man, that's awesome that Coach Howell thought of me enough to be like, if I have questions, share. And it's crazy how it just comes full circle. Coach, before we go, if is there any and like I always let my guests do this, is there any shout outs that you would like to give to anyone that, kind of comes to mind? And you kind of touched on your family and your brothers, but I like like anyone else that you want to, kind of give thanks and gratitude for.
I mean, everybody that's I'm thankful for. I mean, Thanksgiving was like great. It's great for me because it makes me think about the people in my life. That it's also sad because some of the people that I'm thankful for that are part of who I am are not with us anymore,
Yeah.
and uh, it hurts a little bit to think about those people. But
Yeah.
and there's, I mean, obviously my wife, who's a great part of like the support network that I've had, and she loves, she has been, um, with me for 28 years, and anybody that can, you know, put up with me for that long, and all the 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 things that I think about and the way my mind works, and how all that stuff that I think about wrestling that I just told you about, all that thing, there's things that I dream about, they cause me to forget other things that are, that are things that I have, like go get the dog food. I can't believe I remembered that yesterday. But she put a little note on the right next to she leaves her notes in the coffee machine because I get up really early in the morning, and she left a note that said, "Thanks for getting the dog, remembering to get the dog food." And I was like, "Yeah, that's one good thing." Yeah.
That's
So yeah, um,
awesome.
the people that all the coaches that have been part of my life, I try to, it's like Jerry Milstead, my high school coach, Eddie Griffin, my college coach, Joe DeMeo, who was the great Greco coach in um, New York, and I had the opportunity to go up there and work with him, see his coaching, uh, and how he treats kids, and um, all of the athletes that I've, learned from,
Yeah.
guys that were up there, like, Andy Saris, he's a great coach, but, it's an awesome, person
Yeah.
stuff. My, you know, middle school coaches, I had great people that just, you know, taught me that, I think I learned from them that you just care about like they just think about like you pass on like in this sport more than any other sport, you
Yeah.
pass on what you know. Other sports, that's why I say I feel like dirty when I ask people, for money when they're doing a clinic, because I don't want to, I want to dirty clutter up my love for something with money. And I think there's a lot of people that taught me that through the years, that
Yeah.
showed me that they cared about me, and they cared about the integrity of this sport enough to show me things, help me along the way. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely, coach. Yeah, I think you know, no matter where we are in life, whether we're an athlete, a coach, a parent, or whatever stage we're at, giving gratitude for sure is definitely important, and I think you embody that for sure. Coach Howell, this was amazing. I know we kind of had, I think when people watch this, they're going to see like a classroom version of you, and then like as you said in the car. So
Now
I
I'm in
think
the
that's,
car, traveling,
no, I think
traveling
that's,
wrestling event.
no, I
Yeah.
think that's awesome, and I'm glad that we had a chance to connect yesterday. I think everything happens for a reason, and I'm glad that we had a chance to see each other and connect, and obviously, like you being on the Kumite Lifestyle podcast. So, Coach, I thank you so much for your time. I know time is one thing we can't get back, so we thank you for being on today's show, and for those watching. So, Coach, if you don't mind, so you're based out of Delaware, and you're currently coaching at Smyrna. Um, I know you're not big into social media, or maybe you are, but where could people find you, or get in touch with you if they're interested in getting to know you more, or maybe have you in for I don't want to say clinic because we just talked about that, but if they're interested in getting to know you.
I honestly I don't. I'm not sure, Nick. I'm not. You're right. I'm not on social media much. I do have a Facebook account, but only because uh, one of my friends, I won't name him here, thought it would be funny to set me up in a Facebook account. And there was a time where I just, I communicated with people on there. I don't now, but it's kind of, I get Facebook notifications. So I do look at like things like the Delaware Facebook. I do, those notifications pop up for me. So maybe that would be the way to,
Okay.
yeah.
So on
So
Facebook or Delaware Wrestling or Delaware USA Wrestling.
yes, yes, and I'm still a board member in Delaware USA Wrestling. So Cliff Backus is now the state chairman. So through him or the website there, that's a way too.
Sounds good, Coach. All right. Well, for those watching, there's your opportunity. And again, Coach, thank you so much for your time, and I hope
Well,
that you enjoy the rest of your day.
yeah, thank you, Nick. I
Yeah.